My name's Alex. I'm an associate consultant for Focus Education, and I'm here to give you a brief overview of the Learning Challenge curriculum. So I wanted to sum it up in a nutshell as best I could at the start of this. Essentially, what we've got as the main drivers of the Learning Challenge curriculum are history, geography, and science. However, there are units of learning available in particular for early years. We've also recently developed some units of learning for design technology, and there is an overview with suggested units of learning for art and design too. Progression mapping is all there for you. So whether it's in terms of a unit progression, the disciplinary and substantive knowledge progression, but also vocabulary progression overviews, there's lots and lots of resources there relating to your progression mapping. We've worked very hard, particularly in history and geography, to develop something called golden threads, which is the key concepts that run throughout the Learning Challenge curriculum. We've also thought a little bit about mixed stage planning. This is evolving all the time, especially because the mixed stage question is always very, very different dependent on your setting. But we work alongside schools here to make it work for them and the issues that they're encountering in terms of mixed stage planning. So we have solutions for you there. All of our components in terms of the resources that we've created are editable, which allows you to adapt them for your purposes and for your setting and your children. We've also thought about assessment, and we've tried to keep this in a very low stakes format with multiple choice quizzes and things like that. Retrieval activities are inbuilt throughout so that you can dip back to prior learning and ensure that children have understood what they've been taught before, but also make learning links to new learning. And then there's lots of other features which I'll talk to you briefly about a bit later on. We're always thinking about how we can add further resources, develop little things that can support you with developing your curriculum really effectively for your children. So to start digging a little bit deeper into this, the whole of the Learning Challenge curriculum is based on this pedagogical approach of link it, learn it, check it, show it, know it, that Clive Davis has kind of come up with. And essentially what we want to do is make sure that whatever unit of learning is being taught, children are linking prior learning to what they're about to learn. Then during the learning, thinking about approaches to how they're going to learn the new information, how teachers are going to check that they've learned that information. And then towards the end of a unit of learning, thinking about how the children are going to demonstrate that knowledge so that you as teachers are really certain that they've taken away the key learning from those units. And then finally, how, as they move through their time in primary school, how you're going to make sure that they know it for sure and that it's stuck with them as they move through year groups and that it's not just forgotten about once they move on. So really, really important that I set that out straight away. This is the pedagogical approach behind everything we've developed and designed as part of the Learning Challenge curriculum. We've thought about overviews as well. So it's not prescriptive in terms of you have to teach certain units in certain places. However, we've given a suggested overview of how we would put things together. This is our history example overview, and you can see there are elements of choice there highlighted in purple, whereby if you want to sub in a different unit, there are a few different options, and that's for you to make decisions as a school. You don't have to teach every single unit. If you want to develop your own local history unit as part of the progression, then that's absolutely fine too, and you can slot that in where you feel it's appropriate. But essentially what we're trying to do is give you the guidance that you need or might like to get you started, and then you can start to make adaptations as and when you feel necessary. In terms of the progression then, we've thought very carefully about the substantive knowledge, and we've made this really refined. There's a danger sometimes to try and teach too much to the children. So for each unit of learning, you can see here in year 5, there are 3 units that we've selected here that have very clearly only got 4 or 5 key pieces of knowledge that we want the children to take away by the end of it in terms of the substantive knowledge, the topic specific, the unit specific knowledge. There will be other learning that takes place, of course. There will be other elements of those units that the children will go away and research themselves or learn about through your teaching. But by the end of the unit, what we want to make sure they're really clear on is those key pieces of knowledge from a substantive point of view. What we've then also done alongside this is developed a disciplinary knowledge progression. So for each year group, you can see very clearly the expectations under the different areas of in this example, history. So we've got timelines, chronology, evidence-based interpretation, and significance as our 4 key areas for history. But for each year group, all the way up to year 6, you can see the kind of historical knowledge that you want the children to develop across the year. So the disciplinary knowledge is the knowledge that makes the children historians. It's not specific to one unit. It's knowledge that they will develop across the year, and we've mapped this out for you for each year group. What we've also thought very carefully about, as I said at the start, is developing golden threads through our curriculum. So we wanted to make it really clear some of the links across different units of learning. So we've identified some of the key concepts in history and in geography that we feel apply very much so to lots of our units of learning that we've developed. And we've made a point of highlighting those to teachers through the use of these images and these symbols to ensure that actually it's really easy to start seeing which units link, for example, for the concept of monarchy, where that comes into your history teaching in different units and where it doesn't. To model how we've drawn all this together, every unit has an overview. So you can see there, I've just mentioned the golden threads. So along the top, you've got all 6 of the history golden threads there, but the ones that are highlighted and popping out and have been illuminated with that purple glow, they're the ones that are present as part of this unit of learning. The ones that are faded out, it means that they don't necessarily come into it as prominently based on the content of the unit. You might look at that unit and want to make some adaptations, and that's fine, and maybe it becomes more prominent, and that's entirely up to you as teachers and as a school. But this is just a starting point for you. Also, within that, every unit is led by an overarching inquiry question. So we've got, why was ancient Egypt civilization ahead of its time here? And that is then developed into your components with 4 or 5 sub-inquiry questions. And this is the same for history, geography, science, and our new DT units that we've developed recently too. That's taken from your substantive knowledge. So the key 5 pieces of substantive knowledge are turned into your inquiry questions and might be worded slightly differently, but that's essentially where they come from. And that's to ensure that it's at the forefront. The key knowledge is at the forefront of every unit of learning that you're teaching through the learning challenge. And then finally, your disciplinary knowledge that applies to that unit of learning is there. It's taken from the progression for the year group, so in this case, year 4. Certain elements might have been worded slightly differently to be more specific to the unit at different points. But essentially, the disciplinary knowledge is largely the same across the units that you will teach within that year group. To go a little bit further then into the golden threads idea to show you how that works, we've got here an overview of the year 2 unit. So as you can see, some schools choose to teach 2 units across a year, some choose to teach 3 units across a year. But here you can see all sort of 6 or 7 options that we have for you. So there's lots of elements of choice, but you can see there where the golden threads are highlighted within different units. You can see that some of them, such as invention, come up in all but 1, whereas monarchy only comes up in 3 of them. So that might influence some of your decision making, but it's not the be all and end all. It's more just to highlight where those concepts come up so that as you build your progression through the school, actually you can see the opportunities for making links across those concepts and hopefully consolidating children's understanding of prior learning and supporting them to utilize it to make new learning stick. Something else we've considered, as I said, is the mixed age question. And what we've tried to do is put together a sort of an overview of how that would work with your kind of standard cycle, year 1 and year 2 mixed, year 3 and year 4 mixed, and then a year 5 and 6 mixed. We have created variations of this for different schools when they've contacted us and said, we'd really like the curriculum, but our mix is this or our mix is that. And actually, we've started thinking about potentially having sort of a 3-year cycle in certain parts of a school or things like that. So we are thinking about mixed age and we are very open to considering how we can support you better with that. But in terms of what's readily available now, this is an example of a year 1 and 2 cycle. So this would be cycle A in geography. You've got a choice from unit 1 and unit 2 if you want to just do 2 units of geography across the year. And if you want to do 3 units, you'd select 1 from unit 1 and then do the 2 units that are in unit 2 essentially. And that would form cycle A. But again, you've got your key knowledge set out there nice and sensibly. The disciplinary knowledge would be the same as in the previous progression that I showed you. And then this is cycle B. Again, making those choices about the units that you want to teach your children, dependent on how you structure geography across your school, but it's all there with the key knowledge as well. In terms of the overviews, again, these are linked to the golden threads at the top, like we talked about. There's a key overarching question that leads the learning over the whole unit, key inquiry question, learning challenge question. And then within that, your components, again, are still led by sub-inquiry questions. The biggest difference on this overview is when you look at the disciplinary knowledge. And what we've tried to do is highlight, if it's a year 1 and 2 mixed age class, highlight the year 1 disciplinary knowledge that we want the children to take away from the unit, and highlight the year 2 disciplinary knowledge that we want the children to take away by the end of the unit as well. This is because no matter what class structure you have, if a child is a year 2 child, then we need to be aiming for them to understand the disciplinary knowledge for their age. Whereas with the substantive knowledge, whether you teach about where I live in year 1 or year 6, yes, there might be a level of increased challenge in how you deliver things and your expectations, but that predominantly comes from the disciplinary knowledge. Where the local supermarket isn't going to change, where the position of your school isn't going to change, the postcode that the children live in isn't going to change. So it's the disciplinary knowledge that really impacts that, and we've thought a little bit about that in terms of planning for mixed age. So to go into a little bit more detail in terms of how that looks within a unit, these are the things that you'll have within any unit of learning. You'll have a pre-learning assessment, you'll have a knowledge organizer, you'll have 4 or 5 components, which are your lessons essentially. These can be split up into 2 parts if they're quite long as well. So it's completely adaptable in terms of what you want for your needs. There's a set of retrieval tasks. There's also an end of unit assessment, which again, it's meant to be low stakes. It's not kind of meant to be the be all and end all of assessment. It's meant to support teacher judgments. And it is largely multiple choice so that it supports those learners who maybe find it challenging in terms of their written ability. It's not about judging their writing. It's about judging their historical knowledge. So in terms of the pre-assessment tasks, they might look something like this. We've got similar things that, if you know, I've used a sort of a KWL grid principle before. We've got things that are similar to that, slight variations in here in terms of what I know already and what I think I know there in that Egyptians example. And then sometimes some of these tasks linked to images. Here you've got a map of ancient Egypt where it's actually trying to see whether the children understand where Egypt is on a map or can locate Egypt on a map. So there's lots of slight variations with the pre-assessment tasks in terms of identifying that knowledge that the children do or don't have already. We also have knowledge organisers to support with this. And as you can see, the key substantive knowledge is down the side under that key knowledge heading. This links to the progression. This links largely to your sub-inquiry questions for your components. So we've tried to make everything link up so that it's really clear both for teachers, for leaders, and for the children learning, so that it's really clear on what the key knowledge we want them to take away is. We've also included the key vocabulary on that knowledge organizer so that children are, they're able to refer to it when you're utilizing it within a lesson. It's not necessarily a case of that they have to go and find out what it is all the time. They've got a reference point there. There's also images to support and develop their understanding. It might, encourage them to kind of think of something that they know already or link to something that they've studied already within the unit by looking at those images. They've been carefully chosen. And then there's a little prior knowledge box at the bottom where it's just another opportunity, if teachers want to use it, if children want to use it, to note down anything that they think they know about the ancient Egyptians before they start their learning. Each component then includes lots of different things. I've taken these snapshots from the website to show you how they look on the website. So if you're on there, you can find them. But each component will have some resources to support teacher subject knowledge. There will be slides that can be shared on the screen, or some of the slides have tasks that can be printed out for the children. There'll be resources to support teaching and learning, and there'll be links to further information like websites and video clip links and things like that that can either develop subject knowledge for teachers or be utilized within a lesson to support the children's development of their knowledge. So if you haven't seen it already, you can download this unit for free if you sign up for a free trial. But this is taken from our ancient Egyptian civilization unit, and it's component 1, and every component starts like this. Here you can see a teacher's notes page. And as I said, there's information for teachers about what they're going to be teaching about and what they need to know about. There are links to further information. Some of those links might be linked to video clips and things like that. It's up to you as teachers to decide whether you want to use those as part of your lesson or not. It might just be that you need to brush up on your own subject knowledge. It might be that it's highly relevant to the children and useful for your lesson. Then there are further slides, things like, particularly in history, things like timelines are presented so that the children can start to develop their chronological understanding. Use of key language, it's really important in this unit to link to the other ancient civilizations. So that's made really clear, putting those time periods into perspective in terms of the kind of the grander chronology of the past, looking at comparing it to different time periods there, and then also using images to make comparisons between what was going on in one part of the world compared to another. So looking at Britain in the Stone Age, which was going on at the same time as the ancient Egyptian civilization was starting to kind of rise up. So it's really interesting to make those comparisons with the children. Further tasks supported by images, clear explanations, clear steps for those tasks, and thinking about reminding children of the fact that they're going to be acting like historians there. Don't forget, write like a historian. And then to support that, we've got scaffolds. So if you've got children who struggle to kind of set out their learning in their books, you've got a very simple scaffold there to support children with collecting their ideas. These can be used in a range of ways. They can be used independently. They can be done as a class on the screen. They can be printed out bigger on A3 and used for group work, paired work, all that sort of thing. Again, it's entirely up to you as schools and as teachers how you choose to use these resources. They're there as a starting point. If you feel they need adapting, you can do that, but we're always intrigued to hear how you've adapted it because it can influence how we develop the learning challenge further. And then finally, there are a range of retrieval activities as part of that unit, which I think there are multiple uses for these retrieval activities. I think on the one hand, you can use the ones that are appropriate within a unit. So maybe you're in the fourth lesson of your unit of learning, and there are certain things that you want the children to recall from earlier on in the unit. You can utilize them there. But actually, when you teach your next unit of learning, there might be things that are relevant from the learning that you've completed around the ancient Egyptians that you want them to retrieve when you're learning about the next unit of learning. Maybe it's the Roman, maybe it's the ancient Greeks. But I think it's important to use those retrieval activities in lots of different ways and not just within the unit that we've attached them to. Subsequently, you might, in one year group, want to find some retrieval activities from the year group before or 2 year groups before that have a bit of knowledge that really links to what you're trying to teach the children. Encourage them to retrieve that knowledge through one of these retrieval activities so that they can then be more successful and avoid sort of cognitive overload and things like that. The other thing with these retrieval activities is that they are largely variations on a theme. So there's usually between 8 to 12 retrieval activities that are included in part of a unit of learning. And generally, as I said, they're variations on a theme so that the children get used to using the same sort of retrieval tasks, but it's the context that changes. So they're not trying to learn how to do a new task once they've got used to those retrieval activities. It's actually just a case of them applying their knowledge rather than having to teach them some sort of new process again. So there is a lot of thought that's gone into that side of things as well. And then once you've worked your way through a unit of learning, we do have our end of unit assessments. This is just a snapshot from one. If you'd like to find out more, please ask. But essentially, the majority of the questions within them are multiple choice. There's around sort of 10 to 15 questions in each. Usually the last couple of questions start to step away from that multiple choice nature because they're aimed more at the disciplinary side of things. So your first range of questions will sort of assess the children in a low stakes way on their substantive knowledge. What can they remember about the ancient Egyptians in this case? And then the final couple of questions are always based around developing their disciplinary knowledge. So how can they be historians when studying the ancient Egyptians? And that will sort of assess them on things like, do they understand the importance of sources of evidence? Are they able to assess a source of evidence's reliability? Are they able to make judgments from evidence that they've seen? And there'll be images and examples of evidence and things like that are there to support the children with developing their responses and their answers. We've also designed them actually so that they'd be really easy just to be read to children if needed. So that if as I said earlier, we're not trying to test them on their writing ability. We're not trying to test them on their reading ability either. We're testing, or I hate actually, the word testing is the wrong word. We're assessing their ability to understand and interpret historical information. We're not trying to assess their reading and writing abilities here. So that's the assessments, and they can be used in a range of ways. And then just to kind of draw things to a close, it's developing all the time. Some of these things a year ago didn't exist, and they're now on there. So we've got a whole, something I didn't mention at the start, we've got a whole PSHE curriculum that comes free if you sign up to the Learning Challenge curriculum. It's called Let's Talk, and it tries to focus on issues that children are experiencing, whether it's linking to social media, whether it's linking to relationships with others, thinking about themselves, thinking about the school community, thinking about the wider community and all of that sort of thing. We've also just recently, in May time, did full units of design technology learning to enhance what was there already. So we had an overview of sort of unit overviews, and these have been turned into units of learning just like the history, geography, and science have. And we intend to do the same with art. Currently, the art overview is very good, but what we'd like to do is develop that a bit further so that actually there are specific lessons and specific components and things like that that teachers have a bit more that they can dig into, but that is in the pipeline as well. Some of the other things that we've developed as well, the disciplinary knowledge progressions for children in history, geography, and science are now available through the Learning Challenge website, free to subscribers. And what that does is, rather than expecting children to understand the progression that we give to teachers, which you wouldn't do, we've tried to set that disciplinary knowledge out really clearly for individual year groups, for the children in child speak, so that actually they understand very clearly on a one-page overview exactly what they need to do to be a historian in year 1 or year 4 or year 6. We've also developed other resources such as year group timelines and year group maps, which if you want to find out more about those, please feel free to get in touch. But each year group has a specific timeline or map that supports children with developing their chronological understanding and developing their locational knowledge. And this builds on year and year so that actually we're building those frameworks. And it's another form of how progression is subtly built into the Learning Challenge curriculum on top of the really obvious progression documents that I've shown you. And then finally, something that I'm slowly developing to be a part of the Learning Challenge curriculum. There are 3 or 4 available at the moment, is History Bites. They are supposed to be they have multi-uses. So one of them is to develop teachers' subject knowledge around the units of learning, but also they're usable for the children. So if you download them, put them on your 30 laptops or 30 iPads or whatever it is, the children can actually use them for research purposes and develop their knowledge around those units of learning even more effectively. So that brings us nicely to the end point, really, of my sort of chat around the Learning Challenge curriculum. Just to be really upfront in terms of how it works, it's a yearly subscription. And if you were to subscribe to everything, it's £899 plus VAT, which actually we think is quite good value. We're very conscious that school budgets are tight at the moment, so we're not trying to overprice it. At the same time, there are lots of options. So you can buy a specific subject for the whole school. You can buy a specific year group. You can have individual subscriptions. And then obviously there's the whole school subscription. So there are options if you are looking for something really specific, if it's just history or 1 or 2 subjects, but we've got ways of working in terms of that. But that's the cost per school. All resources are available online, which means they're downloadable, they're editable, and you can utilize them how you wish. The whole point for us is that we're providing you with something that's a great starting point and does the job, but enables you to develop it further in terms of your context and the children that you teach. And then any updates that happen to the Learning Challenge curriculum while you are a subscriber, they're included as they become available. You don't have to pay more. If the price increases during that year because we've added something, that there is no price increase. But while you're subscribed, anything that gets uploaded is yours to take away. And then just to kind of end with a partnership that we've been working on over the last sort of 6 to 12 months. If you use Insight as your tracking system, then the Learning Challenge curriculum's objectives, as it were, the substantive knowledge progression, the disciplinary knowledge progression, Insight have taken those, and if you are a subscriber to them and you subscribe to the Learning Challenge curriculum, you can get in touch with them and say, look, we're using the Learning Challenge curriculum. Can we have access to those curriculum objectives? Because they're very adaptable. They can, you can change all sorts on Insight as a tracking system. And they will confirm with us that you're a subscriber and they will make those available to you. So in terms of developing your teacher assessment around whether it's history, geography, science, whatever it is that you're using the Learning Challenge curriculum for, you will have access to those statements and be able to use them as soon as they make them available to you after confirming with us that you're a subscriber. And that will make things kind of all tied together really nicely from teaching to assessment. If you do have any further questions, you can look on the website. There are some FAQs, answers to those. You can make contact with Focus via Twitter. I'm on Twitter, or X as it's called now. We're also on other platforms like Instagram and LinkedIn and places like that. And I highly recommend that you check out the website if you haven't done already. As I said, you can sign up to a free trial, which enables you to download some free units. One of them is the ancient Egyptian unit, which I showed you elements of today. But you also can download a geography unit, a science unit, and a DT unit, and a unit of PSHE as well. So there's lots and lots for you to explore. And if you do have anything further that you want to ask about, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. Thanks very much for watching, and hopefully we'll speak to you soon.